What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And meanwhile, the Euro Cup is going on, but we're still here to talk about the New York Giants. Of course, I'm locked in today, tuning in to Italy, Forza Italia, hoping that we win, make it through the group stages. But in the meantime, the New York Giants are getting ready for training camp in just under a month. They report, Alex, for training camp 1 month minus 1 day to today. They will have their first practice in exactly 1 month from today, which is really exciting stuff. I love training camp. I think it's one of the most exciting moments in the NFL offseason. Finally, the players put the pads on, they start practicing, and we start getting an idea of what this team's roster is going to look like for the upcoming season. So, really excited about that. But as we preview training camp and take a look at some of these players that we're going to be keeping a close eye on during those practices, we have identified an area of potential strength or weakness for the New York Giants. We can't really tell which one just yet. What's going to happen to the secondary? Will it be a strength? Will it be a weakness? Well, ultimately, the Giants are gambling on their secondary. They're gambling on youth, inexperience, and potential. That creates a boom or bust scenario here for Big Blue that we kind of want to unpack and discuss in today's episode. Talking about Andrew Phillips, the rookie, stepping up into this big starting role as a nickel cornerback. Meanwhile, Cordell Flott stepping into the boundary cornerback role. How's that going to go? We kind of just want to discuss this, unpack what is a very young but high potential New York Giants secondary entering training camp and entering the 2024 season. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. Listen to Apple or Spotify. Please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling about this young, inexperienced, but high potential secondary that the New York Giants have going into this season?
I'm doing pretty good, and yeah, this Giants team is leaning on youth and inexperience a little bit, but you know what? Sometimes it's necessary to spark growth, and I think that ultimately the Giants have invested a lot of draft capital in their secondary. I mean, Tyler Nubin, obviously the newest addition, and Andrew Phillips we're going to talk about as well, Deontay Banks, and then obviously Cordell Flott, Darnay Holmes. All these guys are draft picks. They have very minimal money in free agency funds allocated towards the secondary, more so obviously in extending like Brian Burns on the new contract, and of course you have Dexter Lawrence and Andrew Thomas, some big contracts there. But this secondary is true and tried, built through the draft. So sometimes you need these guys, not sometimes, all the time. You need these guys to pan out. The Giants are really riding with Cordell Flott, it seems, as their primary CB2, at least to start camp. They, continuously say they have a lot of confidence in him. He's their guy. Nick McLeod, I wouldn't rule him out as a potential competitor, but, Cordell Flott's like a wiry, he's going to miss some tackles. He's not the strongest guy in the world, but he's got the instincts and the capability to be a pretty solid cornerback on the outside in the boundary. I don't see him as a slot guy. I know they kind of tried to use him there at times, but he's just not big enough. He can't help the run defense. He basically is a non-factor there because if he steps up in the run game, he gets, he can't shed blocks. He, can't stop running backs. He can't really stop tight ends. He can't stop bigger players. He needs to be going up against those more wiry, longer receivers like Devonta Smiths of the world. So I think that's where he will kind of excel in the future. But, looking at this secondary in terms of where they're leaning on, it's Deontay Banks' show. You know what I mean? It's his show at this point in time. We love Deontay Banks, really good player, one of the most athletic cornerbacks in the draft ever. So, you're looking at a player that, at the very least, he has some elite tangible traits. Now and he's got that ego too. I love a cornerback that has a good ego, and he's not like a bad ego. He's a very confident but also good guy. So, you love that about Deontay Banks. Everything about him screams upside potential, possible, star. So I think he takes a big step forward after a rookie season where he got kind of exposed against some really good receivers, which is what you want to happen. Garrett Wilson, guys like, Devonta Adams, he got exposed at times, and that's how you learn. If you're a young cornerback, you're going to struggle against some of the best receivers in the game. Deontay Banks got his feet wet against not just some of the best receivers in the game. And he had some good moments as well, mixed in along with some bad ones. So we know that he can be great. It's just about learning. It's just about watching, experiencing, seeing how these guys operate, seeing what they do pre-snap, their release packages, everything about your opposition. Now Banks has a little bit of experience to parlay into what we hope to be a much better sophomore campaign as this team CB1. He kind of held that job last year, even though Adoree Jackson was there. Doesn't seem that the Giants are spending any money at CB2, or at least a competent veteran to pair with Banks. I think they're going to let them kind of fight it out. I think they're going to let that CB2 job kind of develop on its own. And if they really need somebody, or if there's injuries that happen, they'll wait, they'll have the cap space, and they'll go and sign somebody. Kind of like what happened with Logan Ryan a couple years ago. They had an injury, and they waited until after training camp, but the season was coming around. They went and got Logan Ryan, who's pretty solid for us. So I do think that the Giants will just, buy their time, as you kind of referenced a couple weeks ago, and let this job unfold naturally. So, how do you see things going right now in CB2, your confidence in Deontay Banks? And then we'll kind of hop over and look at Andrew Phillips, who is really kind of an underrated player. I do think that he's a really solid prospect. His draft stock really rose right before the draft happened and ended up becoming a third-round pick. I think that he could be a player the Giants develop at the nickel spot. He's traditionally a boundary guy. But he has some nice upside. I am excited to see how the Giants expand upon it.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too. Definitely excited to dive into Andrew Phillips. But to answer your first question, how confident am I in Deontay Banks? I have the utmost confidence. This is a player who I thought was just incredible coming out of Maryland in last year's draft. I wanted him for the New York Giants in the first round. I was thrilled when they landed him. And I thought that as a rookie, yeah, we saw him thrown into the fire. We saw him have his fair share of struggles. But let's face it, he was a rookie cornerback playing CB1 for a very aggressive man-to-man Giants defense that does its players zero favors under Wink Martindale. That defense and the way that it was set up, you're going to get beat. The cornerbacks know that they're going to get beat. The idea is that the pass rush through blitzes will get home before the cornerbacks get beat. That's really the way it works. You're not actually playing straight man-to-man perfect coverage all the time in that defense because you're really relying on those blitzes to get home and apply pressure and create some mistakes. But for Deontay Banks, I thought that when he was given a fair opportunity to play in coverage, he played well, and he did go off against some of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and I thought that he held his own on more than one occasion. So entering year two, a season where he's going to be playing in a much more simplified and easy approach to defense with Shane Bowen playing a lot of zone coverage, I think that you're going to see Deontay Banks play a whole lot better this upcoming season and really come into his own as the Giants' primary coverage defender. But opposite him, there are some question marks. Of course, you've got Cordell Flott projected as the starting CB2, but how comfortable do we feel in that? Well, I'll be honest with you. Personally, I'm not super comfortable with it. I think that the Giants probably should have done a little bit more to find the boundary cornerback this offseason. Granted, it's not too late. They could still go on the trade market or into free agency. They've got an extra $11 million from Darren Waller retiring. Maybe they make a move between now and the start of the regular season, but I think they're banking on these youth players to take that jump forward. And while Cordell Flott absolutely has the potential to take that step forward, there is cause for concern because first of all, he's very skinny, very lanky. He's been banged up a whole lot. And second of all, he hasn't played any outside cornerback at the NFL level. He's been in the nickel throughout the first two seasons of his career. So him moving onto the outside, while it definitely raises his ceiling and potential, it also lowers his floor. And that does give me, like I said, cause for concern. He's the real X factor of this Giants defense for me, or really just that position, is because if Flott does struggle throughout training camp and preseason, I think there's a good chance that we could see Nick McCloud jump him on the depth chart. And not only Nick McCloud, but guys, this coaching staff is still probably pretty high on Trey Hawkins. I know he struggled a lot as a rookie. He got benched very early on, but considering how quick they were to put him into the starting lineup last offseason as a rookie, they must view him pretty highly. He turned a lot of heads. He played a lot of impressive football throughout last summer. If he does that again and maybe goes into the preseason, looks even sharper, I could absolutely see a world where Trey Hawkins gets a second crack at the starting gig, and maybe this time in a simplified defense, like I said, he takes it by the horns and he runs with it, and he actually earns and wins that starting job and plays well going into his second season. I think that's totally possible for Trey Hawkins. So Nick McCloud, Cordell Flott, Trey Hawkins, I think this is something that gets sorted out through training camp. Again, Flott is the projected starter. I would put that down with pencil, not pen. I think this is going to be a really interesting battle to watch throughout the summer, and I'm really excited to see who takes on the opportunity and wins the starting job. I like Nick McCloud, though. I think that too many Giants fans are ruling him out because he's a little bit of an unknown player. He's a lot more physical. He's like 6'1", 193 pounds compared to 6'1", 175 pounds with Flott. The physicality is important, and I thought that it showed up last season in Week 17 when Nick McCloud got a few reps against A.J. Brown. He looked pretty solid against a more physical, large, staturing wide receiver. So I do like Nick McCloud as well for that position battle, and I think it's going to be the biggest one that I'm keeping an eye on during training camp. And then followed closely behind that will be slot cornerback. How does Andrew Phillips look throughout the summer? Does he perform well during training camp? Do the Giants have something in their brand new rookie nickel cornerback? Or are we going to see a little bit of Darnay Holmes this season? Who knows? It's totally possible. Darnay Holmes being one of those players that I think is actually battling for a roster spot this season, but somehow, some way, he's battling for one every year and finds his way onto the Giants roster. But Alex, how are you feeling about Andrew Phillips, Kentucky product? Physical, not necessarily the best tackler, but very physical in coverage. Really like the way that he plays the game of football. He didn't have any interceptions, I believe, throughout his collegiate career. Wasn't necessarily a ball hawk by any means, but played tight in coverage, played physical, and fits in well with what the Giants are trying to do in terms of their mentality on the defensive side of the ball. How are you feeling about Andrew Phillips as a rookie?
Yeah, I mean, look, I wrote about Andrew Phillips the other day, and I was surprised to see he's a really physical dude. Like, he's a really good athlete. I do think that when you look at Andrew Phillips and kind of what his makeup is, he's a little smaller, but I do think that he's really intelligent. And when you look at Andrew Phillips and what he did at the Combine, a lot of teams, this is not just the Giants, said that he was one of the best interviews that they had. Like, he is really, really smart. And what I think you need to be playing nickel is really, really smart. And the reason for that is because you need to determine what your slot receiver, your opposition is doing pre-snap. What kind of route are they running? Are they going to be put in motion? Is it man? Is it zone? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to beat man? Or are they trying to beat zone? And I think that when you look at kind of what Andrew Phillips brings to the table as a outside corner, I actually think he transitions better into the slot because of that intelligence, because he can help diagnose, okay, I know this is going to be a run. I know this is the alignment they set up when they're trying to do some outside zone runs, or they're trying to do some inside zone, or whatever they're going to be doing on the offensive side. He's able to diagnose these things pre-snap, and I do think that intelligence gives him a major advantage. The more information you have, the better you're going to be, the more efficient your unit's going to be. And I think you could say that about any single player, any single position in football. The more information you have pre-snap, the more efficient you're going to be post-snap. And that's kind of what I like about Andrew Phillips, is how intelligent he is. I saw a video of him jumping over a car the other day. Like, he's got some really good talent. I do think he's very, very underrated in terms of what his impact is going to be for this Giants secondary. I think he's going to win that job outright. It's not even going to be close. I know the Giants also have Trey Herndon they brought in as a veteran to kind of offer them some depth on the inside and out. But, Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky is one of those players that if you look at his numbers, you see volatility, right? You'll see like one game he was really good, one game he was really bad. Like, this game he missed some tackles, this game he didn't miss some tackles. And I think that it was partially scheme related. They were like how they were using him. Again, he's not known to be a nickel guy, but I think that his makeup actually promotes him being more of a nickel guy. So, what do you think about his intelligence, his football IQ, the fact that he did so well in the interviews? The Giants saw that and said, we want this guy on our team because he's going to be able to help us pre-snap, which gives us more ability to make plays post-snap. I do think that's an underrated variable when it comes to his makeup and his upside that not many people discuss.
No, I think that's a really great point to bring up, Alex. I mean, when you're looking at players and culture fits and mentality, all of that stuff really plays a role in the success of an NFL player, especially a young player trying to get their legs underneath them. I think that you could argue we've seen Giants players in the past step into the league with high expectations, but maybe not have the mentality to succeed in the New York spotlight or to do the extra work that really makes you a good NFL player. Not to name any names, but like some of these big offensive linemen that the Giants have drafted come into the league with a lot of potential, don't realize that potential, and honestly, it's got to be something more than just their athleticism and their talent. There's got to be something more in terms of the way that they handle adversity and how quick and smart they are with football IQ. But one of the things that we love about Andrew Phillips that you just mentioned, football IQ is there. His mentality is there, the confidence, the smarts, all of that stuff. And for one position more than any others, and we learned this, Alex, talking with Brian Walker, defensive backs coach, D-backs Academy. He coaches Jabril Peppers, Xavier McKinney, Darnay Holmes, a bunch of NFL talents. He told us that confidence is everything in the defensive backfield. Like, the players that play with the most confidence are the best players in the NFL. And if you're not playing with confidence, you're not going to succeed at the NFL level playing cornerback or safety. So for Andrew Phillips, knowing that he's stepping in with that confidence, same way I felt about Deontay Banks. He stepped in with so much confidence, never felt like he was wavered by any misstep that he had as a rookie. Those players, I really feel comfortable banking on long term as building blocks for this team, knowing that they have the confidence to battle through the adversity, the football IQ, to make those smart plays and become really talented players for this New York Giants team. So I'm really excited about Andrew Phillips. When he was selected in the third round, was he necessarily my choice? Was I over the moon with the pick? Maybe not, but the more you learn about him, the more that gets uncovered, and the more we hear about how he absolutely nailed the pre-draft process, the more confident we can feel in the Giants' pre-draft evaluation of this player and feel like if he does perform well during training camp, he can absolutely take on that big job as the starting nickel cornerback. And listen, that's an underrated position in terms of its value because a lot of people will overlook slot cornerback because it's not one of the two starting outside cornerback jobs. But in the modern NFL, teams are basically using nickel defenses as their base now. Like they have 5 defensive backs on the field more often than not, which is an anomaly. I mean, if you could compare that to football 20 years ago, that was never the case. But nowadays, nickel is the new normal. So having an aggressive nickel cornerback who can make plays as a tackler, be aggressive in the passing game, be on the field for the majority of the game, it is extremely important for an NFL team. So the New York Giants drafting a slot cornerback in the third round once again here with Andrew Phillips, again, re-emphasizes how important that position is becoming in the modern NFL and also gives you hope that the Giants are finally getting that position right and their secondary can have more depth and have more consistency throughout it from front to back. So really do have a lot of confidence and faith in Andrew Phillips. Love the way that he plays the game. And one last little tidbit of information I'll throw out there. He's rejoining a former teammate of his from Kentucky, Wan'Dale Robinson. He's excited to face off against him during training camp. I'm going to be glued to any videos of Wan'Dale versus Andrew Phillips. Those are going to be some of the most fun videos to come out of training camp. I'm really excited for that. But Alex, anything else in the secondary that you want to dive into? I know the safety group is interesting as well because it's very young. We've got Tyler Nubin, rookie of the second round, who's going to be starting at free safety. Opposite him, Jason Pinnock. I feel like people don't realize Jason Pinnock is 23, 24? Still a really young player. This whole secondary, very young. Pinnock stepping in with the most experience, but still a young player in his own right, only his second season as a starter. How do you feel about the back end of this defense? Are you confident in that duo, or do you think that there might be some sort of a drop-off? And I imagine you do agree with me. There will be a drop-off going from Xavier McKinney to a rookie, even if Tyler Nubin is a great player.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's only normal to assume there's going to be some sort of drop-off. I personally, when I look at this secondary, see a lot of, inexperienced road bumps, but that's kind of what it takes. I just find it really interesting the Giants are doing this, right? Like going into a season with a secondary as inexperienced as you could say weak as this, it definitely makes me think they're trying to develop these guys. Like it makes me think that they're okay struggling a bit in the defense because they have different long-term goals. Look, it's totally possible they don't. They really emerge and have a really good secondary, and obviously that would be the best case scenario. The difference between Xavier McKinney and Tyler Nubin is going to be noticeable. However, there's a reason that there's something called positional value, and there's a reason the Giants let McKinney go. I do think that they went in full this offseason in positional value. They really took that to heart. Tyler Nubin is, kind of the result of that strategy. But, keeping that cost lower makes a lot of sense. I like Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota. He's a captain. He's a leader. He's a ball hawk. He's a really solid young player. But again, just inexperience. So I think that's kind of where we're going to see the bumps and bruises. But that's part of the process. And I think this is definitely a step in the process for the Giants. Think about like how much youth they really have on this team. They're leaning a lot on young guys in the secondary, leaning a lot on young guys in the receiving core, a lot of young guys, even at running back, aside from Devin Singletary, in the offensive line, John Michael Schmitz, and they obviously have guys like Josh Azudu. We'll see how he performs. And then you have Evan Neal, who they continue to give opportunities to, even in the trenches. On the defensive side, still got Kayvon Thibodeau, who's still pretty young. So, I do think that right now the Giants are in a spot where they're leaning on a lot of youth. That's part of the process of the process of a rebuild. But I think it's necessary, and I think they need their draft picks to pan out. I think the only way to see if they do pan out is to give them playing time. They have a lot of confidence in guys like Cordell Flott, have been waiting for this opportunity. A lot of confidence in guys like Nick McLeod, and obviously rookies like Nubin and Andrew Phillips. So I do find it interesting that they're going in this direction, but I don't find it absolutely surprising. So that's kind of part of this entire narrative that the Giants are still in a rebuild. This is not a team that's going to win a championship this year, most likely, but it's part of that process of getting to the point where you can actually compete for one. You got to have cost-efficient talent. You got to have your draft picks pan out. And I think, the Giants are trying to get those draft picks experience to see if they do in fact pan out long term.
Absolutely. And honestly, getting players to pan out long term, a lot of that isn't drafting well, it's developing well. We got to see what the Giants can do in terms of developing these players better, investing a third-round pick into Cordell Flott, a sixth-round pick into Trey Hawkins, a second-round pick into Tyler Newman, and now another third-round pick into Andrew Phillips. The Giants have invested quite a lot into the secondary. In terms of first-round pick for Deontay Banks, I didn't even mention that. That's the big one. So a lot of draft investments into the defensive backfield. Got to develop these players, though, because you know that you're drafting good talents, but how do these players perform at the NFL level? Well, that's really going to be up to the Giants coaching staff and player development personnel. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this shapes out. Of course, we're going to be keeping a close eye on this defensive backfield throughout training camp, and we're really excited to give you all the updates on any training camp position battles and any other storylines coming out of camp and from now until camp as well here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so don't miss the episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.